This is Reframe, the podcast from the College of Education, Health, and Society on the campus of Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Today on the podcast, we're revisiting one of our most popular episodes. It's a conversation about sports psychology with Dr. Robin Vealey, a professor in Miami's new Department of Sport Leadership and Management. Sports psychology is used among athletes and coaches to improve performance and increase motivation. But we're also learning about the wider benefits that can help all of us achieve more and perform better in all kinds of ways. It can help people in high-stress jobs, people with performance anxiety. It can help build confidence and focus, and more. Robin Vealey is currently one of the leading researchers in this field, and she's here to talk about what sports psychology is, what it isn't, and how it can help all of us achieve more. So, Dr. Vealey, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Can you start by just talking a bit about your background and your interest around studying sports psychology?
Well, I like to say I study and am intrigued with the achieving mentality in sports. So I began my work in anxiety and then moved into confidence, and also have studied burnout. So if you think about it, trying to achieve, there's a certain mentality associated with that. And of course, you need to have coping skills and resilience and confidence and know how to, the research actually shows that having anxiety doesn't hurt performance. It's whether or not you use that in a facilitative or debilitative way. I mean, everybody gets anxiety. It's how you interpret it that affects whether it hurts your performance or not. So I've always been fascinated with that. And then that also then moves into, I'm interested in coaching effectiveness. So I do a lot of work with coaches, and I've written a book on coaching psychology. And then I do a lot of applied work. And so in terms of mental skills training. And so how can we take these cognitive behavioral strategies, visualization, productive thinking, relaxation type skills, and how can we then use that to enhance people's performance and well-being. Mm-hmm. So always been fascinated with that.
What are some of the common misconceptions around sports psychology? When you say the term sports psychology, is that something that's becoming more and more well-known, or what do some people still think about when they're introduced to this concept?
Sure. Maybe the first one is that sports psychology is like clinical psychology, that we're dealing with clinical issues, like clinical depression, clinical anxiety, eating disorders, if you will, alcohol abuse. And I just talked about this to my grad students this morning. The issue with sports psychology is we're a hybrid field. So professionals out working in sports psychology have trained either in kinesiology, like I have, or psychology. So we do have some people in counseling psychology that also offer services, but it's taken a while to reduce the stigma with athletes, where they think if you see somebody in sports psychology, you're abnormal or there's something wrong with you. And I like to use the line, you don't have to be sick to get better. There's nothing wrong. It's just like taking extra physical reps. This is just trying to systematically, use the mental reps. But then that's the second misconception. Well, it's really maybe two different misconceptions. The second one I like to think about that is that if you come to see me to help your performance, then you're going to be able to come in my office, and in 15 minutes, I'm going to be able to get you to be more confident. So there's this idea that it's this quick fix, and I'm going to say something to hypnotize you, and it's just like physical training. The idea that you could do this in 30 minutes would be like trying to go down to the gym and strength train in 30 minutes and get stronger. The research and our work with elite athletes shows it takes months and years of training and visualization to get really good at this. And so that's really the third one, is that you could just do little bits and pieces. It has to be systematic. Everybody visualizes. Everybody uses imagery, and when I ask, they don't use it systematically, because, for example, an athlete gets in a slump, and so really they don't realize it, but they're visualizing themselves striking out or missing a free throw. And so what you've got to do is learn to control that, if you will. So that, takes some time and takes as much work as the physical training. But a lot of people, they want the Spock mind meld from me, which doesn't really work.
Is it something that everyone can benefit from? Is it often used to focus on someone's who's in a slump, to laser in on a specific issue or a specific problem? Or is it often used in a more general sense to improve overall well-being?
Both. I mean, interestingly, I get called a lot or get contacted a lot when there's a problem. But I teach my students, and the worst time to really begin mental training is when you're in trouble. You'd like to, but in all honesty, that's when I hook up sometimes with athletes or teams, because there's a reason to kind of bring you in. But the best time to work, in sports psychology and apply this would be off-season, pre-season, because again, it takes time to work on these things. Because sitting in my office, I could probably convince you of how to think better and visualize. But in the heat of competition, that needs to be habitualized, routinized, just like all your physical skills. And so I think, yes, we can help people try to, fix some things, but it's really best if it's systematic. So what I do, somebody comes in and we try to help them resolve this crisis, but then we say, okay, now let's continue on and make this a more systematic program.
What are some of the ways to tell if it's working or not? I mean, I'm sure coaches pay attention to statistics, and there's all kinds of objective measures of performance, of how many baskets are being made or improvements on that front. But are there other ways to tell if this is actually getting through to someone or working on other levels?
Well, it's a really good question. And one of the things I always ask my students, I ask them, what percent of your sport do you think is mental? And I get anywhere from 40 to 90%. And then I'll say, okay, how much time do you spend mental training? And I get a typically not a low, very low number, or even zero. And I'll ask them why. And one of the answers is it's really hard to quantify. And that's why our field has been slow to catch on, I think, say in university athletic departments, because every university athletic department has a strength and conditioning specialist. Because if you work with him or her, you're going to show, I increased my vertical jump by 3 inches, and I increased my bench press by 200 pounds. You work with Robin Vealey or a sports are they more confident? Now, so to answer your question, one is performance, and you see that. We do have psychological inventories that we can use, but I like to say it's performance, but also well-being, and I just tell the coaches that's hard to quantify, but the coaches that buy in, they can tell by observing behavior. And, even if it's not performance, let's say it's a softball player, and maybe her hitting average doesn't rise, but one thing we train people on, of course, is to focus on quality at bats, because you can't really control outcomes so much in sport. The coaches, they understand that. Yeah, better quality at bat, they can see that. But in all honesty, that's hard, because they want to see the quantifiable outcomes, and it's often hard to give them that. Now, in our literature, we have evidence-based practice. So, in our literature, yes, that we've taken these psychological techniques and strategies, and there's, my goodness, hundreds of studies shown that imagery enhances performance, or self-talk, enhances performance and decreases anxiety, or it increases confidence. So that's in the published literature. But when it comes to coaches, they're going to win. Well, and I can't promise that, but I like to say I can help put them in a position to win.
It seems like that's the sort of thing, too, where that would be right in line with being able to apply to a much wider range of activities, too, right? The name sports psychology sort of implies that there is this focus on sport, but, is there a wider use for these techniques that can be employed in, any number of ways?
Yeah, well, the term is used a lot, performance psychology. And so we're really doing performance psychology. And so in this department, the performance focuses on sport and physical activity. There's also exercise psychology and working with people. I just talked to someone yesterday who's getting ready to run a half Ironman, and we do mental planning for that, and working through barriers and pain and all of that. And then many people in my field consult with businesses, corporations, musicians, artists, because it's the same thing. You're getting performance anxiety and you need to focus. And so absolutely, it's about performance psychology.
So if someone is dealing with a high stress situation, and you talked about some of the quick things maybe they can do in 15 minutes, but that it still takes a lot longer of a time to really adopt these habitual habits that get really ingrained in practices. But just for the sake of our understanding, like, what are some of the things that you would tell people that they could do to increase their focus or their mental toughness or whatever that may be?
Well, there's really two kind of schools of thought. There's the cognitive behavioral, where you focus on, I like to call it, I like to simplify it with athletes and think, we teach you to learn and teach you to think better and to respond better. And so one thing is learning, again, things that cause you to be distracted or you to lose your focus. And then we come up with a focus plan for that. Elite athletes, they don't go to the Olympics and just hope it all goes well. They've got their whole physical training routine, but they have a whole mental plan. And they go from a very broad, getting all the information, but when they're getting ready to perform, they're in they're in execution mode. And the zone is kind of overrated. They hope they're going to get in the zone, but meaning it's very focused. They're focusing on their preparation, their confidence and belief in the process, not that they're necessarily going to win, and the fact that they're ready, and they can't do anything more. And so it's learning how to think, better versus letting all these other thoughts kind of come in. So as a surgeon, they've got all the information, they get there and then they're focused. And, a lot of surgeons play music and they get into flow, just like we get into flow in sport, which any surgeon working on me, I want to be in the zone or in flow, if you will. So relaxation strategies, just simple things like understanding your breathing and how to be able to, go to a breath, a centering breath or even a cleansing breath. A lot of my colleagues teach that to athletes, but the same thing would be people, before you're going to speak somewhere, if you're a musician. And of course, a new approach is the whole mindfulness and acceptance, which is really interesting to me. And, meditation, for example, one of my colleagues at the Olympic Training Center, it used to be that mental skills training was seen as something that you could it's kind of the icing on the cake. Oh, if you want to do this, is something extra. Mm-hmm. It's not like that now. He'll bring you in there and we're going to meditate for 30 minutes. I'll tell you what, meditating for 30 minutes is hard. Meditating for 5 minutes is hard. And it's expected now. And what meditation does is it teaches you to focus on right now, this moment, which is what competing is. See, people get in trouble when they think about the past or the future. I've got to be right now, this shot, not I'm going to win the Masters, not I have to birdie this hole, but this shot, this moment. And that's very, very hard to do unless you keep training to kind of do it. And that's why the whole mindfulness and acceptance helps you kind of get there.
Where do you think sports psychology will go from here? I mean, it's becoming even more of a priority now, right? So how well do you think this will continue to evolve going forward?
Yeah, I think, it's already a priority, but what we've got to figure out now and do a better job of is integrating it into just the normal practice and training routine. That's the other thing that's changed. It'd be like, okay, now we're going to talk to Dr. Vealey for 10 or 20 minutes versus colleagues now, they're on the field with the coaches and they're at practices and it's not something extra. It's not, oh, now we're going to do mental training. It's part of the whole thing. It's totally integrated. That's what's happening now, and that's where we're going to go more and more, I think.
Dr. Robin Vealey is a professor of sports psychology at Miami University. If you enjoyed this podcast, or if you think it might be helpful to someone you know, please share it. Reframe is always available for free on Apple Podcasts and wherever podcasts are found.